Okay, so again, this is going to be a really difficult one. I have to try to, well, I feel the need to keep trying to talk about what Jung conceives as the relevance of alchemy. So what is alchemy to Jung? Why is it important? And I'm sort of, again, two-thirds of the way through his essay, which serves as the introduction to psychology and alchemy, entitled Problems of Alchemy. And there's been, yeah, a few videos so far on this, and I need to try to pick up back into the middle of the essay. And so how do I frame this up? Well, okay, well, I'll start from myself, since I'll try make it as personal as I can. I mean, it's it's not easy. So yeah, look, there's a way that I'll just go straight to this. This is a symbol of an experience, and it sort of opened up at a certain time as kind of like a Zen koan. And that phrase at the bottom there, it says, one becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth. And this is a kind of Gnostic prophecy from the first century AD by Maria Prophetessa. And as I said, there's a way that this phrase kind of opened up for me, again, like a Zen koan. And so I've been trying to understand what it means, uh, as one might, and having already been sort of deeply immersed in Jung, he's obviously proved helpful and interesting. And so basically, what I want to say now is that, yeah, mm, so Jung in some way understands that archetypes are the sort of the structural foundations in some way of the world of existence. And like in some way the archetypes are the ground of the psyche, so to speak, but also of the cosmos. So there's a way that Jung feels that the whole world, both psyche and world, psyche and cosmos, are structured by the archetypes. And some of those archetypes are numbers. The ones that are relevant here are the numbers one, two, three, and four. And so this is a kind of Pythagorean thing to say. So Jung sort of following from Pythagoras, but also others, regards these, especially the archetypes of number, what you could call the archetypal aspect of those numbers, one, two, three, and four, as extremely deep to the structure of universe or cosmos. And for that reason, those numbers and their archetypal, again, aspects are involved in what you could call revelation or gnosis. And so there's a way that the when reality itself is sort of revealed or disclosed in a deep way, in deep experience, those features, one, two, three, and four, they show up, whether it be in experiences of unity, for example, of trinity, of duality, or of quaternity, for example, the cross, in different ways. And so the idea here is that by appreciating that, by understanding let's say, the archetypal significance of those, particularly those four numbers, I mean, also others, as in a way axiomatic to the structure of the universe, kind of like laws. From that place, one can sort of apply that archetypal understanding to appreciate changes in our history. And it's really hard to explain what I mean by that. So obviously, there's a way that for Jung, he can sort of look into. So what would Jung say? He would look into history, and so he would say, for Jung, sort of the Christ event when Christ happened, he was a sort of symbol of the self, which for Jung is a sort of center of awareness within us, which includes both conscious and unconscious. And for Jung, Christ is a symbol of that. And the self is about wholeness and totality. It's sort of a center of awareness that includes all or expresses all of who we are. And Jung feels that Christ is sort of in a way, an incomplete expression of that. And because he was an incomplete expression of that, his manifestation, his incarnation, for, according to Jung, sort of needs to be compensated. What do I mean by that? Well, okay, so for Jung, the incarnation of Christ is sort of in this tradition of mythology since the Babylonian creation myth, the Inuit Lish, when Marduk defeated Tiamat. And this corresponds to a move in the sort of archetypal world, the fundamental sort of nuts and bolts of the universe that expresses a dynamic of toward consciousness and toward unity and towards the masculine. That move is expressed in the incarnation of Christ. And because there are, in a way, other elements to reality that are not included in that move, they are expressed in compensating form in the kind of undercurrent to the Christianity that sort of circled around Christ. And so talking about these numbers, I have to try and be more specific. So Jung feels that the incarnation of Christ and his expression, along with the church, let's say, they kind of represent this trend that I described toward, again, to both one and three, toward unity and trinity, and toward the masculine, and toward the sort of heavenly or spiritual. And Jung feels that these qualities are compensated by the opposite qualities in a way within the unconscious. And he feels that I think it would be fair to say of Jung that that the practice of alchemy, and also like what as science inherited that, but also not just alchemy, but also sort of Hermeticism and Gnosticism. The idea being that these traditions compensate. Well, how do they compensate? Well, they work toward or they anticipate a different incarnation. And this, I believe, it would be fair to say that this incarnation is expected or anticipated to, in some sense, bookend the Christian aeon of the last 2,000 years. I believe that would be the case, and that different incarnation, instead of sort of God coming down, so instead of the spirit coming down into the body, there's a way that for Jung, this alchemical compensation would be for the Mother Earth to come up into an incarnation. And for Jung, this is expressive of the archetypes of these numbers. So God descending into the body of Christ is kind of like three becoming one in a certain way. Or you could say one becoming three. It would actually work either way. And whereas this different incarnation, which is designed to sort of compensate that one by expressing the opposite trend, so duality rather than unity. So it's expressive of two-ness rather than one. Also the feminine rather than the masculine. What else? Multiplicity, yeah, rather than unity. And four rather than three. And so then I have to try and talk about what that figure is. And it's a sort of, it's expressive of the great mother, the qualities of nature and the earth, rather than the father, the qualities of the sky and heaven. And it has a hermaphroditic or dual quality character. And so, okay, so that's fine. So So I think then the thing would be to say that in sort of alchemy and Gnosticism, it's conceived that there's a role that we have to play in that. And I have to try and express a symbol to say what I mean. And again, it's this one, which should be visible. And so the idea is that the incarnation of Christ expressed the upper of those two triangles. And with that fourth in the middle left unexpressed, there's a way that um, wholeness was reached only in part. Wholeness was expressed only in part. And so the project of alchemy, in a way, the purpose of it, I would say, according to Jung, would be for people, alchemists, Gnostics, to participate in um, in a way going down to the depths and retrieving that fourth triangle, which is in the middle of the bottom. And if that could be conceived as a kind of questing process, that's like retrieving the sword from the bottom of the pool, rescuing the pearl from the mud. So that process is conceived as what will bring about the state of wholeness, the revelation of wholeness that is in some way analogical to Christ or parallel in some way. Not opposite, but parallel. And so this is why Jung says, quote, alchemy is preeminently concerned with the seed of unity, which is that fourth triangle there, which lies hidden in the chaos of Tiamat. So Tiamat as a symbol of the unconscious, a symbol of chaos, and forms the counterpart to the divine unity. So it forms the counterpart. What does he mean? Well, there's a way that there's a 3-in-1 structure. And the three is sort of expressive in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit that is sort of already conscious. We already know of that. And for Jung, there's a way in which there's a fourth, there's a one that is still within the unconscious. And the project of alchemy is to find that one and to release it, to rescue it in a way. He says, like this, the seed of unity has a Trinitarian character in Christian alchemy and a triadic character in pagan alchemy. Okay, so now I have to try and express this problem of 3 and 4, which is really, really difficult. And already this is so arcane, right? So what I'm getting at here, I mean, so Jung has talked about the problem of 3 and 4 in many places. So there's a way that I mean, this image is expressive of that problem. There's a way that 3 and 4 are difficult to distinguish. So it's referring to what I mean by that is it's this problem of 3 and 4, and they're going together, is an it's a kind of archetypal problem. It's something that we don't understand, and it's expressed in mythology and archetype in that language in different images, and it's a kind of process, and it's a process which is in some way between any duality, between any two. Again, so difficult to talk about. What I want to notice here is that if we look at this symbol, see in the bottom half, well, there's two like big triangles, right? 1 and 2. But there's a way that the 1 in the bottom corresponds to the 3 at the top because they're all light and pointing upwards. There's also a way that that one in the bottom can be easily confused with the three that it's within. So there's a way that that one in the bottom, it's the fourth, as in the fourth piece. See? Because it fits into the top. It's the fourth piece. I don't know how to else to express this. It's really, really hard. The point of this was to try to show that there is a a confusion between the process of three and four, the problem of three and four. They go together in a way that's not easy, that's actually impossible to debride because it's one process. But I can't say what I mean here. Anyway, he wants to give some images that show this, let's say, fact. He says, according to other authorities, it corresponds this seed of unity, this fourth, which is here, the lower orange triangle in the bottom. It's a kind of seed of unity. And it has again, a Trinitarian character in Christian alchemy and a triadic character in pagan alchemy. According to other authorities, it corresponds to the unity of the four elements and is therefore a quaternity. So look, what do I mean by that? Well, one way of putting that would be that there's an idea here that there's something to be recovered from the unconscious, that there's something in there that we're missing, and it's conceived as a kind of seed of unity. Well, imagine that that seed of unity is actually a kind of process. So that seed of unity, it. I would say that that seed of unity is the resolution of the problem of three and four. And that's why the symbols of this quote unquote seed of unity, the symbols of the goal of the alchemical process, like the philosopher's stone or Mercurius, they have this paradoxical symbolism associated with both three and four that go together. In fact, there are ways that this quote unquote seed of unity within the unconscious is expressive of the archetypal significance of all of those different numbers of one, two, three, and four. Jung feels that there are reasons why it has to be associated with four rather than with three. And so the idea of Trinity, of triunity, is in some way not fully expressive. So Jung would say that the top triangle here is the Trinity, and that it's in a way incomplete, that there is a fourth. That's why sort of alchemy and Gnosticism, they're heretical in a way. Anyway, he says there's always a vacillation between three and four that comes out over and over again. Even in that axiom of Maria that I mentioned, the quaternity is muffled and alembicated, meaning subtle or refined. So he gives some other examples that describe this problem. He says in alchemy, there are three as well as four regimina or procedures, three as well as four colors. There are always four elements, but often three of them are grouped together, with the fourth in a special position, sometimes earth or fire. Again, they're examples of this problem of three and four going together, and that the fact that that is a problem is expressive of the fact that we haven't solved it. So the solution to this problem is designed to, in a way, restore a certain split condition that we've been in. So Mercurius is another symbol of the goal of the alchemical process. Jung says Mercurius is, of course, quadratus or square, meaning associated with four, but he's also a three-headed snake or simply a triunity. And so there's, again, uncertainty about that problem of three and four. And that uncertainty is associated with this figure of Mercurius, for example. And if we consider that uncertainty, it's also connected with the quality of two, duality, because the central ideas connected there are associated with three as well as with four, which is there are two of them, right? And Jung notices and points out the similarity with our conscious process. So there's something going on sort of archetypally, this problem that I've been expressing, that also corresponds to a structure that's within us, quote unquote. He says, the psychologist cannot but mention the fact that a similar puzzle exists in the psychology of the unconscious. The least differentiated or inferior function is so much contaminated with the collective unconscious that on becoming conscious, it brings up, among others, the archetype of the self as well. So if I try and show this again, there's a way that for Jung, that fourth triangle at the bottom, the little orange one, it corresponds to the self, the archetype of the self. And we can see that that triangle, well, it's one, right? But it's also the fourth because it fits in at the top as the fourth. So it has both. And when it becomes conscious, so Jung would say this corresponds to our sort of cognitive functions. So he talks about four cognitive functions, and I won't talk about that here, but just to say that he feels that one of them is sort of closer to the unconscious. He calls it the inferior function. And that means to Jung that this image here, this symbol, it corresponds with that structure. So that the triangle at the bottom that I just said was sort of representative of the self is also representative of the inferior function. And Jung feels that when it, in a way, when it becomes conscious, it often brings up the others. So when that jewel in the bottom, that fourth triangle, when it rises up to the top half, it often brings with it the three red triangles, which is a difficult kind of experience. Yeah, and as he says, there are some symbolic qualities associated with both the three and the four, which is a little bit difficult to express because, again, you don't want to define it too closely. Definition is quality associated with two, with duality. But he talks about how four signifies the feminine and the motherly and the physical. whereas three is associated with the masculine, with the fatherly, and with the spiritual. And so this uncertainty that I've been expressing regarding this problem of three and four, there is a kind of wavering between the spiritual and physical. This that problem, the problem of three and four, is expressive of that wavering, and the solution to it is their unity, reunification in a way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is leave that there and then come back to the rest of the introduction, which is in some way easier. Because I don't know if it's going to be, I don't think that it can be too much harder than this.